Summary of Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. This book is often seen as a landmark work of environmental writing. In it, she talks about how pesticides, like DDT, can be bad for the environment. Specifically, she talks about how pesticides were being sprayed from the air to try to control huge numbers of insects. In many ways, Silent Spring was a public warning, gathering expert opinion on how dangerous this practice was becoming. In addition to the real-life examples of pollution she talks about, Carson's book also makes a larger point about how people should interact with nature. This point of view helped the deep ecology movement grow by showing how all living things and systems are connected. Carson lays out her main point after the book starts with a story that imagines a future where silence rules the world after poisons have done their worst damage to the environment. She says that in a world where everything is connected, people should be very careful with their sudden power to change their surroundings so that they don't destroy the systems that keep us alive. Carson starts her project to educate the public by listing the main groups of poisons that are used. She calls them biocides because they don't just kill insects. Carson breaks down the effects of these poisons into their individual parts, looking at different parts of nature from the water to the land and from plants to birds. She starts by laying out her main ideas and naming the chemicals in question. It takes a lot of anecdotal and statistical evidence, along with quotes from experts, to show that pesticides are much more dangerous than their makers will admit. They also show that in nature, they will build up and interact in ways that are hard to predict, which is especially true since the US hasn't spent much on research into the subject. Next, she looks at a few spraying programs that went horribly wrong. Then, she shifts her attention to talking about how chemicals affect people. She says that the cheerful marketing of deadly pesticides is disgusting. She also says that these chemicals are almost always found in the food people eat and that they are not regulated. Finally, she talks about the evidence that these chemicals cause cancer. In the end, she says that pesticides are not only bad for people and the environment, but they also don't work because pests often come back in huge numbers after being sprayed because nature's built-in system of checks and balances has been upset. Insects are also becoming less vulnerable to new poisons at a dangerously fast rate, which looks a lot like an arms race. Carson says that the only way to move forward is to copy the ways that natural systems work and use biological controls instead of chemical ones whenever possible. For example, instead of just using chemicals to kill bugs, we should find and use enemies of pests. With all the facts she gives us, Carson says the smartest thing to do is to give up the flashy, cocky chase of the easy answer and instead take the road less traveled by, giving up the idea that nature only exists to serve people.
About the author. Rachel Carson grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania and went to Johns Hopkins University to get her master's degree in biology in 1932. To pay for school, she worked in research labs. After her father died suddenly, Carson didn't have the time or money to get her doctorate. Instead, she got a job with the U.S. Bureau of Fisheries, which later became the Fish and Wildlife Service. While she was there, she started writing and got her work printed in newspapers and magazines. The first books she wrote that made her famous were about sea life. She was able to quit her job and focus on writing full-time after they were successful. Her most famous work, Silent Spring, was started by her in 1958. She died in 1964.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.